good evening and welcome once again to another edition of our Government at Work program. A program brought to you by the CCM-led Nevis Island Administration and hosted by yours truly, Keith Scarborough. This program is broadcast live on VON Radio every Thursday evening from 8 to 9:30 p.m. Then we broadcast on Nevis Television on Sunday evenings from 8:30 p.m. It's a program designed to inform and educate citizens and residents of Nevis, both at home and abroad, of the many positive developments that are taking place here in Nevis. Folks, it's another wonderful Thursday evening here in the island of Nevis, and it's a time when we all look forward to a night filled with information as it pertains to the continued good governance of the CCM-led Nevis Island Administration. I, for one, look forward each week to go deep into discussions with the ministers of government, the permanent secretaries, advisors, department heads, as well as top officials from the statutory corporations to ensure that you are given as much information as possible. We also make every effort to keep the discussions as frank and as honest as possible so that you, our listening and viewing audience, will get a true reflection of what is happening here in the land that we all call home. If you miss this live broadcast, this and other Government at Work programs, as well as our Buzz Review programs, can be seen on our Facebook page, YouTube, and the NTV web page. I would like to remind all of our Flow television viewers at this time that our television programming can be seen on channel 103. And for those of you who have digital TV, our television programming can be found on channel 99. So please make sure you log on each and every day of the week for our news package, our informative programs, and of course our entertainment packages. We shall take a short break, and when I return, I shall introduce my guest for this evening program to you. So stay logged on to the powerhouse of the Eastern Caribbean, VON Radio 860 AM.
So right, St. Thomas is right, St. James is put together and build your land. Right, St. George's and St. Paul's together with St. John's. This land is enough for all to share. No reason to leave and go nowhere. Foreigners can come here from America and England. There is something mighty sweet about my land. And if the foreigners who live here can insist that it's here they're from, then I swear I'll never leave my native land. One people, one country.
Welcome back. Folks, I am pleased to have as my guest this evening, Premier, the Honorable Mark A.G. Brantley. Honorable, good evening and welcome once again to our Government at Work program.
Good evening and thank you for having me. It's always a delight to be here and a privilege to engage with the people of Nevis and obviously with yourself as the host, Mr. Scarborough. So thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure having you. And as usual, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us this evening, because I'm well aware that your plate is full at this time with a number of major developments set to take place here in Nevis shortly. So I'm happy that you are able to be my guest for this evening's program. There's quite a lot for us to get into this evening, so let us get straight into it. Honorable, over the past few weeks you have been rather busy, working hard in the best interests of all the people of Nevis, both at home and abroad, on matters that could have far-reaching effects in the future. I want to zero in on some of those matters this evening, and I want to start with your recent trip to New York and Canada, where, among other things, you launched a new tourism brand for Nevis. I was made to understand from some of my friends there in New York who attended that launch that it was an excellent launch that was professionally done. Share that whole experience with our listening and viewing audience, as well as the other activities that form part of that trip.
Well, Mr. Scarborough, we have been working on this for some time. The tourism branding for Nevis had not been updated in the past 20 plus years. And as a consequence of that, we were very keen to update that branding, to upgrade the branding, and to have, if you will, a new look, a fresh look at Nevis. We engage an entity called Tambourine in the United States that has been working with us, and interestingly enough was the entity that came up with with Nevis naturally in the first place. So they've been working with us. They're no strangers to St. Kitts and Nevis. They've done work for St. Kitts as well. And we decided to engage them. And they've been working on that. Now, what did we try to do with this campaign? We tried to localize it, meaning that the models, the artists, we use Casey Jeffers, who's now making a very big name for himself in photography in the United States and elsewhere, and is really becoming a global figure in the photography space. And we're very proud of Casey and all that he has done. He has been having exhibitions. He recently had an exhibition in Miami. And so he's doing incredibly well. And we thought, wouldn't it be a good thing to own this tourism product and to have it around our people? And so Casey was commissioned by us and came home, if you will, to do the shoot. And he did a wonderful job. He has produced some portraits that form the backdrop and the background for this new campaign. We also did something that was unprecedented in the Caribbean. We did some aspects of the campaign in black and white. And people may ask, well, how are you showing a Caribbean island in black and white? That was the surprise, if you will, that many expressed. But what we were trying to do was to ensure that Nevis was depicted in a timeless, classic way. Black and white is normally used to show luxury. And that is what we wanted to evoke, that timelessness that is Nevis, the elegance that is Nevis, the luxury that is Nevis, because it is our ambition to appeal to the top echelons of the tourism market. We are not a mass market tourism destination. We are about heads in beds. And as I like to say, I prefer 100 guests paying $1,000 a night than 1,000 guests paying $100 a night, because the math is different. Despite the fact that people may say it works out the same, the math is different, the environmental impact is different, and our model in Nevis under this administration is all about high yield, low impact tourism. And so we don't necessarily need thousands of people. We need the right people paying the right price, and that is where we think that our island will benefit most. And so what this campaign is intended to do is to appeal to that demographic. And I can tell you that when we launched, the other aspect that we were trying to achieve was to avoid the sameness of Caribbean marketing. Every island in the Caribbean is marketing sun, sea, and sand. All of us are portraying our mountains and our beaches and our blue oceans. And you have some steel pan, some soca, or some reggae playing in the background. Standard fare. You've seen one ad, you've seen them all. Maybe you get a carnival costume or something like that, but it's all the same. When we launched this thing in New York, it was amazing. The response was electrifying. People had never seen anything like it. In fact, one of the professionals who was there, one of the media professionals, said to me that he anticipates that others will now follow suit. So this was impactful, it was impressive, and it was clearly taking a risk because nobody has ever done it before. But the impact has been profound. And I will tell you that the uptake, the commentary on it, we have got extensive media coverage on this launch thus far. And a lot of that media coverage has been about how different it is. Nevis is a small space. To get attention, to make some noise, if you will, in the marketplace, we have to be different. And that is what we sought to achieve here, and I think we have achieved that. And so we had this event in New York. The event was at the Paley Center. It was in Midtown Manhattan. It was curated by our diversity ambassador, Candy Carter, who, as you know, is a Emmy Award winner, used to produce the Oprah Winfrey Show. And she reached out to clearly contacts she had. And so we ended up with quite a few celebrities, people from the media, people from the movies, people like Julia Hill was there. I think there was a lady there, I can't remember her name, from Real Housewives of Atlanta. We had some broadcast journalists who were there, people who were popular on television, etc. So we had quite a few celebrities who were there and who were on the red carpet. And then we had our Nevisians, some came out. We also had, of course, masquerades. They came out to dance. My brother Duggins was there from Cotton Ground and others. And we ended up really having, I think, a wonderful night. They had a beautiful welcome cocktail. There was a mango type of cocktail. And I think everyone everyone was very impressed. The entire area at the Paley Center was branded with Nevis's new branding. We gave away some beautiful bags with some beautiful towels, beach towels, all branded with Nevis. And I'm telling you, the reception was incredible. So we spent some money on that event, but I think to do an event like that in the heart of Tourism Week, Caribbean Tourism Week, was happening in the Big Apple in New York. The Caribbean Tourism Organization was hosting this Caribbean Week. And so all the countries were there. At our launch, we had the Honorable Marsha Henderson from St. Kitts. She came with her team. I was very grateful to her for her support. We also had the Honorable Minister Zavago Jolly. He's the Minister of Tourism from Turks and Caicos. We had my friend from Anguilla. His name eludes me now. He wouldn't be happy with me, but he's the Minister of Tourism in Anguilla. And so we had, the entire team were there, and people came out, and I can tell you the response, even from Turks and Caicos, the man who leads their tourism, even from my brother in Anguilla who leads tourism for them, Cardigan O'Connor, that's his name. The response was overwhelming. They were blown away by what we did in New York, and I think that it augured well. It went very well. We represented Nevis in a great light. I was there along with some officials from the Tourism Authority, led by Fayon Jones, who was the acting CEO at this time, and I think we had one board member as well. But the event went very well, Mr. Scarborough. I was very, very happy when I left there. I thought that we had put on a good show, and that Nevis had been well represented in New York. As a consequence of that, we are now getting requests to do something similar in Atlanta. We're getting requests to do something similar in Toronto. We are not yet sure how we're going to be able to manage that, but the word is out that Nevis is the place to be for the upcoming winter season, and as a consequence of that, we have been pushing that and rolling out our media campaign. I do recognize that some unease was expressed in some quarters about the black and white campaign, but I think that those people, one, are not marketing people. Two, they are accustomed to the same old, and so I suppose that's what they expected. Three, they're not the target audience. And so it's if you're going to do marketing that's not going to create a buzz, not going to create attention, then you're not doing anything. Sure. And the island is so small, with such a small budget for marketing, that we have to ensure that when we spend, that spend has impact. Yep. And that is what we achieved, and I'm very, very proud of the team. I want to publicly congratulate the NTA, its board, its management. I want to congratulate all the hard workers there. I want also to congratulate Tambourine. And they asked me to take this chance, and I decided as minister I will take the chance. And I think that so far it has resonated quite profoundly in the marketplace. And as I said, I anticipate that other islands may well follow suit in terms of showing. Now, I just want to be clear to the public that if you want to see the campaign, you can go on our website at www.nevisisland.com. Not only some aspects are in black and white. Right. So not the entire campaign is black and white, but some aspects are in black and white, and we lead with the black and white imagery. In fact, the lead video, which is only about a minute, starts in black and white and then ends in bold color, and that attracted a significant applause from the audience, just in terms of the creativity of it all. So we're very happy with how that has gone. The trip to Canada was earlier, in fact, and I had gone up to Canada because the ANSA, which is the Anguilla Nevis St. Kitts Association, they were having their biannual event in Canada, in Toronto, and they had invited me to speak. As it turned out, I was the only one who showed up as a leader, because normally the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis would be there, the Premier of Nevis and the Premier of Anguilla. But the other two could not make it. The Honorable Marsha Henderson was in Canada, so she spoke on Prime Minister Drew's behalf, and a gentleman spoke on Premier Cora Hodges' behalf from Anguilla. But I was there, and so I became, if you will, the keynote speaker at the event. The event went very well. It was well attended. It was a good opportunity to see and to mix and mingle with people from Anguilla, from Nevis, from St. Kitts, and people had traveled from all over the United States and elsewhere to be there. One of the things that I noted in my speech is that ANSA had this, I think I believe it was the 18th event that they were having, and they had never had one on Nevis. The last time they were here, they were in St. Kitts. They did do a day trip to Nevis, but I'm saying it is time now for them to host in Nevis. So we are working on that. We have pledged our support to see if we can get the next event, which would be in 2027 in Nevis. So we're working on that to see how that works out. But I think, again, that went very well. These trips, however, were very short trips. I've tried my best when I travel not to be out for extended periods, and so I thought that both trips were very beneficial. I also had the opportunity in Toronto to speak to our diaspora, which I think is very important, and to say to them about so much that's happening here, to encourage them to invest, to rekindle their love affair with the island of Nevis and of course with the island of St. Kitts, to come back to look after a lot of this abandoned property that we see around that belongs to them, and have just been left to rot, to tell them that property had value and that they should really come and take care of their properties, and also of course that their children and grandchildren who are born over there now need to reconnect with the land of their ancestry. Too many of them, I thought, were forgetting where they were from, and I was encouraging them to do that. And I thought that was very well received. As you know, the Nevis Island Administration, it was in January this year that we published a whole new policy for returning nationals and for members of our diaspora who are investing. And that has already attracted some attention from people, Bermudans and others, who are saying, hey, let's look at Nevis, let's look to see how we can invest, build a home, have it out there and be Airbnb or whatever the case may be, have a family property there, let us try and invest. And so we're encouraging that by some quite generous concessions that we published in January of this year. So if people are out there listening and they're minded to return home, they are keen to invest, we welcome them, absolutely. I have said, Mr. Scarborough, that for a long time, our notion of an investor was someone coming from overseas who didn't look like us. And whilst we welcome that someone, we should also welcome our own people. And one of the things I'm very proud of is that under my leadership in this government, we have extended the same type of concessions, assistance to local entrepreneurs as we do to those coming in from overseas.
Great.
So we are encouraging our own people to be part of the movement. As I said to them in Canada, they left a long time ago when things were hard in St. Kitts and Nevis. Things are now much better in St. Kitts and Nevis. And they had gone to build up Canada, to build up America. It is now time for them to return home, whether they can do so physically or they can do so in terms of their investment, in terms of their children and grandchildren, but to look again to this place that they would have left 40, 50 years ago in some instances, to see how they can now contribute, having contributed to building those big countries, how they can now contribute more to building Little Nevis and Little St. Kitts. So I think both events were timely and both events went extremely well.
Thank you very much, Honorable, for that detailed report on your travels. I was extremely pleased to hear about the branding, the new branding of Nevis, and even more pleased to hear you say that it went well. Mm-hmm. I looked at the tape myself and I did love it. I must say I did love it. But however, members of the opposition here in Nevis made a big song and dance about the launch and the new branding in particular, merely for political reasons, of course, clearly missing the significance and the success of the launch. I would like to hear your views on their reaction to what could only be described as another great initiative by your CCM-led Nevis Island administration.
I would put it this way, Mr. Scarborough. The opposition here is so programmed to oppose that if by some miracle I was able to bring Jesus Christ to earth tomorrow and he were to visit Charlestown and he were to cure the sick and raise the dead, I guarantee you that the opposition would oppose Jesus' presence in Charlestown. That is how programmed they are. Mm-hmm. when I look at some of the commentary and I look at who was making the comments, I just sucked my teeth and kept moving. I like to say ignore the noise, and that's what I need to do. Because people who don't know anything about anything were seeking to lecture about advertising and about campaigns. And I just sucked my teeth, as I said, and kept moving. Because, one, they had no clue. In fact, I will tell you that as the type of leader that I am, in terms of being open, honest, transparent, I actually went on social media and published an entire article giving the background and the context so that for those who didn't understand what we were trying to do, I would explain it.
Right.
And still you had people out there talking and running off their mouth. And I just, as I said, I just smile because these are people who have the benefit of criticism without responsibility. They have no idea what is happening or what we're trying to do. I mean, I know this is not quite on topic, but just to tell you how programmed the opposition is, that we announced that we would be doing some upgrades and improvements at the Vance Amory International Airport. And the leader of NRP took 7 people out there to protest. So even before we have had a chance to have an engagement with the public to share information, they already start to protest. So I asked, what are you protesting? You don't even know yet what we are going to do.
True.
So if it is that you wait and then you hear and you say, well, I don't agree, that's a different matter. But we just announced we will be trying to upgrade the airport. And when we upgrade the airport, Mr. Scarborough, who's going to benefit? All of Nevis will benefit.
Yes.
So we said we are going to try to upgrade the airport. Mind, these are the same people who said the airport is dead and nothing is happening. We said fine, we want to upgrade the facility to ensure that we have more traffic. We have the plan to have a private jet facility, which I'll get to because you asked me about my travels when I was in St. Bart's. I think that's an important conversation. But we did that, and before we could even come and say to the Nevision people, this is the plan, they went and they had a massive 7-person protest over there, standing up in the hot sun, wasting people's time. And, I just say, well, I suppose most of them refuse to find gainful employment, and so notwithstanding the number of jobs in Nevis, they choose not to because their only hope is somehow to get into government, because it appears that only in government some of them can thrive or make a living, because outside government, not even a Freco cat they can open. I see a lady there, they're selling Freco, and I used to love Freco as a child, and I said, man, I wish one of these NRP pontificators could open a little Freco, sell a little thing with a little red syrup and a little green syrup. They could sell all green syrup if they want, but do something. Do something, help the island. I don't mind opposition. I was in opposition. But opposition also has to be about ideas. If it is that all I can do is oppose and cuss and criticize and cuss some more, it really doesn't add anything. So when I heard the hullabaloo about the campaign and the negative comments from people who don't know anything about anything, that's the only way I could say, because they're not experts, they're not marketing people, they could only say whether they like something. Years ago they asked me if I wanted to judge Calypso for Culturama, and I said, not me. And the guy said, what do you mean you don't want to be a judge? I said, but it would be unfair to the Calypsonians, because I don't know anything about music. The only thing I could say is it sound good. And that is not fair to the artists, the creatives who are on stage giving their best. And the person said they understood. Sometimes I think all of us need that level of self-awareness, that we don't know, and when you don't know, you hush your mouth and you try your best to learn, because this campaign was very well thought out. We took our time with it, and the market response, that's what for me is important, not what opposition people here say, because them can't even convince themselves. The market response, that is what I'm interested in, and thus far the media has been overwhelmingly positive.
Okay, great. Now, before I leave the New York Inn, I understand that during the trip there was to be a diaspora investment office opening. Did that take place?
That really was a matter for the federal government. Yes, okay. That I was not engaged with that. I'm not sure what they did in that regard, but I do know that Minister Marsha Henderson was there. She had also had diaspora engagement in Toronto earlier, but she was in New York for Caribbean Tourism Week. And Minister Samuel Duggins as well came up because they also launched Carnival up there. But I can't speak specifically to the diaspora office.
Thanks. Now, shortly after you returned from your New York trip, you traveled to St. Bart's, where, among other things, you signed off on the Gustavia appeal at the Caribbean committing Nevis to regional cooperation in waste management. Could you shed some further light on that initiative for our listening and viewing audience as well?
So I had been invited to St. Bart's sometime prior, I think early this year. And I had gone there and I met with who has now become a friend, Xavier Lede, who is the president of St. Bart's, the lead of St. Bart's. They call him the president. As a consequence, we have kept in touch. And I was invited to this Caribbean conference. The Caribbean conference is put on by aviation specialists who come together to look at aviation in the region and how we can do more to connect these islands through aviation. And so whilst there, I was invited by the president. Of course, he sent me in advance the information to sign on to this accord. It's a non-binding accord, but what it does, it sets out the intention for us as small island states to cooperate more in terms of the environment, in terms of our fight against climate change, and in terms of waste management. Many people look at these islands, but they don't quite realize that there's a tremendous level of waste that's generated. And because we're an island, and in many cases small islands with limited space, we have real problems in terms of how we deal with that waste. And so some of the ideas are, for example, can we come to an agreement where we ship waste to one of the islands for incineration or for waste to energy? We here in Nevis have tried various things. We, for example, early in my term, we had signed a waste to energy agreement. And the difficulty was that whilst there would be enough waste to start, the developers then said that they would not have enough waste to sustain. So they will have enough waste to start because they will mine the existing landfill and take waste from the existing landfill. But after a month or 2 or 3, after that had been consumed, the question was, were we generating enough waste so that the plant could run? And the answer was no. So this is intended for us to collaborate to look at. So for example, let us say St. Martin were to decide, hey, we're going to have a waste to energy plant here. Nevis, can you send your waste over to us? Anguilla, can you send your waste over to us to use for that purpose? That's the kind of discussion that I think this engenders. So it's intended to be a good faith effort. We have signed on. Most of the smaller islands have also signed on. And the idea really is to create greater cooperation. And we know that we're doing great things here on the island of Nevis already in terms of recycling. We've already successfully shipped 2 40-foot containers of baled plastics off the island. That's an ongoing effort. Through the assistance of the Taiwanese, we've built now a special purpose facility at our landfill to deal with recycling. And the recycling program here has been going quite well. And so we have really been making some strides, and I want to publicly credit the Honorable Janelle Nisbet, because as a young politician and a young member of the cabinet, she has really done an amazing job insofar as waste and waste management is concerned. And so we are waiting to announce some more good news in the context of waste management. I believe we would have just signed off on an agreement for someone to come in to help us clean up the island. And so the idea really is to get a lot of that stubborn waste, I would call it, our tires, our plastics, our abandoned cars and metals, get them off the island. And since they have value to some persons, we say, listen, come and take them, go with them, because it helps us to keep the island clean. And so that's what we're doing, and we hope that we'll get the buy-in from the community in moving and removing a lot of these waste cars and abandoned cars and abandoned, white goods, as they call them, fridges and stoves and that kind of thing. So we are quite ambitious in what we're doing here on the island, and that my signature there was an indication that we are at one with our Caribbean brothers and sisters in that regard.
Great, great, great. Now, during the trip to St. Barts, you also took the opportunity to address the question of airlift between these Caribbean islands. Enlighten us about that process and the purpose, of course.
So I actually asked the Honorable Alexis Jeffers to accompany me to St. Bart's. And that was because Honorable Jeffers has been asked to lead our project on the airport. He in fact did an excellent job in St. Bart's in presenting the airport project to the audience. It was very, very well received. Matter of fact, I will say it publicly tonight that St. Bart's was so impressed that they actually sent in a team here in August. A team of 6 are coming from their tourism department to see what we are doing here, to see how they can have greater partnership with Nevis. Nevis and St. Bart's are very similar in terms of the quality of product that we offer. St. Bart's is a bit more expensive than we are, but nevertheless the clientele is very similar. In fact, I walked one afternoon for about maybe 45 minutes. I walked through Gustavia, which is a little town there, and I ran into tourists. A couple that I met, they said that they were from the United States, and they asked me where I was from. I said I was from Nevis, and they said, oh yes, that's on their bucket list. Right? I met a group of about 14 or so African Americans. They were staying on St. Martin, but they'd come to St. Bart's on a day trip, and they said next year they're coming to Nevis. So the profile of our visitor is very similar. There's some natural synergies. St. Bart's, for example, doesn't have golf. Nevis has golf. And so the distance between St. Bart's and Nevis by light aircraft is usually only about 15 minutes. So the possibility of day trips, the possibility of people staying in St. Bart's, coming to Nevis, playing golf, going to the spa, enjoying what Nevis has to offer, our history, our hiking. St. Bart's doesn't afford a lot of that we have. And then being able to go back to St. Bart's, and vice versa. St. Bart's has a lot of luxury shopping, French food, French wine, French cheeses. So for those here who want to experience that sort of French Riviera in the Caribbean, they can also go over for a day trip. So we're looking at how we can streamline that, because let me tell you right now, Mr. Scarborough, the rules that we have put in place are ridiculous. We, for example, it was cheaper for us and of more efficacious in terms of time for us to do a charter to go to St. Bart's rather than to fly to St. Martin and have to overnight and additional hotel nights in order to get there. So we did the charter. Do you know that we took off in Nevis? We could not, 15 minutes, we could not fly directly from Nevis to St. Bart's. So we took off in Nevis, went to Anguilla, touchdown. All the pilot did was touch the wheel of the plane on the runway in Anguilla, and then took off again. So we didn't land. Well, I should say we landed, but we didn't come to a stop. We just touched the wheel on the runway, took off again. And that is why, because you cannot fly direct from Nevis to St. Bart's. Coming back, it was even more ridiculous. We took off in St. Bart's, went to Anguilla, and then on the way back, my wife was with me on the trip. She nudged me, and we looked down, and we passed in St. Bart's to go back to Nevis. So we left St. Bart's, went to Anguilla, and then turned around and came past St. Bart's to come back to Nevis. So what really should be a 15-minute trip ended up taking us 45 minutes. Absolutely ridiculous in terms of cost, in terms of just inconvenience to people. And these are the things I think we need to work on. Day trippers are saying, listen, hotels down there are saying, we want to send people to Nevis for the day. Let them go and play golf. We want those arrangements. But the requirement that they must go fly to St. Martin first to go through security and take off their shoes and do all that to then come to Nevis. People are not interested in doing that. And so I have made it a point to engage with the Ministry of Aviation in St. Kitts to see how we can relax some of these requirements to encourage more inter-island exchange and more inter-island travel. And in terms of St. Bart's and Nevis, there's a natural synergy there. I would say one last thing. They were very excited about our proposed airport project here, because that airport project, based on what the experts are saying, we should have parking there for about 50 jets, 50. Now, most of the private jet traffic to this region, the passengers are coming to Nevis, Anguilla or St. Bart's. When you see RLB is full of jets during Christmas, people are not necessarily in St. Kitts.
Sure.
Same thing with St. Martin. They're using those airports for parking, but the occupants of those jets, the owners of those jets, are elsewhere. And what St. Bart's is saying to us is that while St. Martin will continue to be their main gateway for Air France and all the flights from the US, etc., the difficulty they're having is that during those peak periods, the experience there is it's just so packed with people.
Sure.
That their, how should I say, their VVIP guests would want a different experience. So Nevis now can become for them the ideal hub for their private jet traffic. And so we are already looking and seeing how we can work out arrangements, because it means that the private jet passenger who's going to St. Bart's can land and park in Nevis, 15 minutes over to St. Bart's, and enjoy their holiday.
Sure.
And so that is something that we are working on, and that is a new sort of economic advantage of us doing this airport. St. Bart's is what it is. St. Bart's cannot expand its infrastructure because of the size of the island. So it can't build a bigger airport, it can't build a golf course, it can't do some of those things. The roads down there, in fact, I smiled to myself because I said the way that Nevisians complain about roads here, they need to see what they call roads in St. Bart's. Very, very narrow.
Yeah.
Very narrow, difficult to traverse, and just a very interesting space. And I think I like to do the comparison, in terms of the airport, the roads, the water supply, all of that. I think that Nevis has a lot to be proud of.
Of course. Now, Honorable, I want to bring you closer to home, and I want to start with what you were just talking about, the pending upgrades to the Vance W. International Airport. You mentioned some time ago that there was still some niggling issues surrounding the lands in that area. Where are we with regards to that at this time?
So there's no niggling issue in relation to the lands per se. The niggling issue was in relation to us drawing down on a loan that was approved 6 months ago from the National Bank. That's where the issues lie. I'm told that that loan, we went into the National Parliament, we passed a resolution, the federal government has guaranteed the loan. There's been a lot of argument, Mr. Scarborough, about this clause or that clause and this person signing and that person. It has really been a very difficult process. I am advised that the Honorable Prime Minister will be meeting with the National Bank tomorrow, Friday, to get this matter resolved once and for all, because we have not been able to draw down. We're ready. The people who own the land are ready. They're waiting for their check. So it's just a question of drawdown. Once we've been able to do that and have secured the lands, then is all systems go. Everything has been submitted to planning. Planning has had their responses. Our technical people on the project will be here very shortly to convene a meeting with planning and with public works. And that meeting is being coordinated by the Honorable Alexis Jeffers, and the intention, therefore, is for us to be able to move forward more aggressively. We have lost some time because we had really hoped that we would have been able to break ground sometime in April, May. We're now in June, and we still do not yet have the funds from National to pay out this particular loan, this particular agreement. Under this agreement, these loan funds, if you might recall, it's 7.5 million US dollars that is going to be the cost of the lands in the area. And so we have agreed with the owners. It's just a question of now paying out, and this has been an amicable process. We have not gone in to compulsorily acquire anybody's land. It has been amicable. We have negotiated in good faith, and I want to thank all the owners in the area. Many of them have said that they see tremendous benefit from the airport being expanded, and so they have cooperated with us, and I want to publicly thank them for that. So we intend to move forward. In relation to the other funding, it's a tripartite funding. We have the money from National for the purchase of the lands. We have some money from Mr. Patrick Drahi, who's an investor here. He's going to fund the east side portion of the development. And then we have some money from the Republic of China, Taiwan, which is going to fund the land side portion. Just so people understand, the east side portion is the runway extension. We have to make the runway stronger, to strengthen the runway, new lighting system, fueling and the fuel system, fuel farm, that's what it's called, upgrades to the safety and security over there, the parking area, etc., the fencing of the entire compound. And then the land side would be the terminal expansion that we want to do, a new cargo shed that we want to do, the upgrade of the tower. We're not knocking down the existing tower, we're just going to upgrade it. And then we're building a brand new fire hall over there with, of course, the fire tenders. And some people say, well, you know, the project is costed at just over 40 million US dollars. So it's a major project for Nevis.
Yes.
Major cost. People say, why does it cost that much? I just want to explain to the public that just one of the fire tenders, and we need two, just one of those is costing us about 750,000 US dollars.
Wow.
So it's a significant expenditure that we're talking about in terms of getting this done and getting this done to international standards. At when it's done, we should have just over 6,000 feet of runway, and that will allow us to take all the private jets currently in use that we're aware of, and it will allow us to take our target aircraft, which is the Embraer 175, and that Embraer 175 it has a capacity to take roughly about 80 passengers. The American Airlines is currently using that model aircraft from Miami to Anguilla, and they're doing 2 flights a day to Anguilla on some days with that model aircraft. And so we feel that that's a good model for us, a good number of individuals to come. And as I've repeatedly said, we're not competing with RLB, we are complementing what's happening at RLB, because the wide-body jets will still go into RLB. If you're going to London and flying British Airways, if you're going to New York or farther afield and you're flying the wide-body jets, you still go to RLB. But for us, the private jets, the regional jets, and of course, we are hoping to attract the regional traffic. Just to finish that off, also in St. Bart's were the people, the CEO of Winair, and we had Air St. Martin there as well. We had some private carriers like St. Bart's Commuter, who were all there, and the conversations were all very good conversations, because they too are looking for opportunities once we get this airport to the standard that we expect to get it. And so we are very optimistic that we will get this done. They were also very pleased to hear about our FBO, fixed base operations, that we intend to build there, and that again is a private sector investor that has come forward. And so we anticipate that this will be a game changer for the island of Nevis, and yet be consistent with what we're seeking to do, which is to appeal to the higher end of the tourism market.
Great, sounds good. Now, the expectation was that by 2026 the upgrades would have been completed. Is that timeline still in place, or?
Well, it really depends on when we can start, because the advisors that we have, the technocrats, are saying that it will take about 18 months. When people tell me 18 months, I say 24, right? Just to be on the safe side. So I think we are now in the middle of 2025. I would think realistically we'll be talking about early 2027. That's my realistic assumption. But the funding is always what is most critical to get projects done. And once the funding is in place, everything else falls in place. So once we can deal with planning and planning's concerns, because obviously we do things by the book, get that done, we have everything lined up, we're ready to go. Incidentally, I would have spoken to Mr. Drahi. As you know, Israel is at war currently with Iran, so I would have reached out to him, and he has indicated that he is very anxious to start this project, and so he is willing to go. The question is, when can we just get to the point where we can acquire the lands? If we can acquire those lands tomorrow, Mr. Scarborough, pay the good people over there for their lands, then I think that you'll see immediate movement to clear and secure the site and get going.
Great, great. Folks, you're listening to Government at Work. My guest this evening is the Honorable Mark A.G. Brantley. We shall take a short break, and when I return, we shall continue with our discussions here on Government at Work.
So right, St. Thomas is right, St. James is put together and build And if the foreigners who live here can insist that it's here they're from, then I swear I'll never leave my native land. One people, one country.
Welcome back. Honorable, I want to move now to another major initiative that could change the whole landscape of St. Kitts and Nevis, but more particularly Nevis, and that is the much talk about development of geothermal energy. I want to start with the bidding process, which according to reports is scheduled to be completed by the end of June. Where are we with regards to that?
Well, we're optimistic, Mr. Scarborough, that we have now the end game in sight. I say that because the bids were originally to be open in February of this year. We had some difficulty with the form of bid document, and we had some difficulty because we had only secured $17 million from the Caribbean Development Bank. These wells, and we intend to do 5 wells, 3 production and 2 re-injection wells. These wells are averaging about $5 million each. And so with only $17 million in the bank, so to speak, the drillers, I'm told, had some concern as to where the rest of the money would come from. The federal government had indicated that they would be the backstop for the project and would provide the necessary support. But clearly, $8-10 million US is a significant amount. So there was that concern. Through the partnership that we've developed with Prime Minister Drew and his team, and the commitment that we have said we share in relation to this particular project, we engage with the Saudi government. In fact, when Prime Minister Drew traveled to Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, he asked me to send a representative, and I sent my permanent secretary, Wakely Daniel. Mr. Daniel reported to me that when the geothermal project came up as an agenda item, the Prime Minister actually gave him the honor of presenting the project to the Saudi government. That resulted in a $20 million soft loan from the Saudi Fund for Development. And so that now brings the tally to $37 million that we have committed to this project. What that means is that the drilling phase is paid for, satisfied. So that would have solved one of the problems and bring some comfort to drillers. The other issue was that the form of contract was a bit problematic. As it turned out, the CDB has not really done a geothermal project before. This is the first. And so the CDB had some established forms of contract. The drillers were saying it may not be entirely suitable for geothermal. So there was a lot of time back and forth. They had over 100 questions, the various drillers. And so time slipped, and we were forced to extend. We extended initially to May and said, well, that wouldn't be the new deadline. But then what happened is that St. Kitts Nevis were hosting a significant conference, the Small Island Sustainable State Conference. And in that conference, Nevis had an entire day dedicated to geothermal on Nevis, and then a youth forum on Nevis as well. And also, not a youth forum, forgive me, the second day was committed to financing. How do small island states achieve financing? So these are the 2 aspects that we had here on Nevis, but the Federation had, and this was a massive conference. I spoke at the opening in St. Kitts. It was truly an incredible affair. So what happened was a few of the major drillers who we expect to bid, they asked us if we could give them the opportunity because they wanted to come to do a site visit. But they wanted to come around the same time as the conference, so they'll attend the conference and do the site visit. So we again relented and extended, and I indicated this is the final extension to the end of June. So we are hopeful that come the end of this month, we would have bids submitted. It will take us perhaps 2 weeks or more to evaluate those bids, to decide on a driller. And then once the mobilization occurs, we expect that drilling will be for about a 6-month period. What we're going to do is simultaneously with the drilling, we start now to have discussions with investors about the plant and what we're going to do about that. The intention is to produce 30 megawatts of power through geothermal, and that 30 megawatts, of course, is beyond the needs of Nevis, because Nevis at peak currently, our demand has grown, so at peak currently we're at about 12 or so, 12 and a half megawatts. Geothermal, as you know, is best for baseline power. So it really is going to mean that we're going to be in a situation of having excess power. That's where St. Kitts comes in. And we have already discussed the interconnectivity with St. Kitts to ensure that the people of St. Kitts can also benefit from cleaner, cheaper, greener energy. This is a national effort on our part. So it's not just Nevis. And in fact, for a lot of Nevisians, because some have said, oh, somehow we're giving away the project to St. Kitts. That is not the case. What we're doing is partnership and cooperation, because the marketability, the bankability of the project is actually better with St. Kitts involved, because it means you have a bigger market for the energy that you're going to produce.
True.
We anticipate that we will in fact have far more energy ultimately than St. Kitts and Nevis can consume. And that is why now what they're calling the power to X, that is getting power to AI centers, getting power to crypto mining for Bitcoin and these digital currencies, being able to potentially send power to neighboring islands through undersea cables to Sebastopol, St. Bart's, St. Martin, etc. The possibility of green ammonia, green hydrogen, all of those are new industries that can come from us being in that position. And what makes Nevis unique is that the scientists have said that we have far more capacity for geothermal power than we could ever imagine that we can consume. So that being the case, we have excess power, and that excess power now will power new industries, new developments on the island, and of course new opportunities. And so that is what we are looking at this stage. So I am very optimistic. Music festival is in a week, and then right after the music festival, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to say to the public that the bids are in, and the Prime Minister and I will be able to announce whoever it is that would have been awarded based on the criteria. And I think that is going to be important. But just so the people of Nevis understand, Mr. Scarborough, this is not about giving away Nevis's geothermal to St. Kitts. It is not about anything other than a partnership. The intention is that all the people of the country must benefit from this resource. Kittitians must get cheaper, cleaner power. Nevisians must get cleaner, cheaper power. But at the end of the day, the resource is a Nevisian resource. It's in Nevis.
Sure.
You can't take it up, you can't carry it anywhere. It's in Nevis. It's like saying, let me take a Brimstone Hill and carry it to Nevis. It can't happen. So the reality is that I don't think that, our people need to be concerned about that. In fact, I will publicly say, that were it not for Prime Minister Drew's involvement, we would not have got to where we are now.
Sure.
Because the Saudi money could not have come otherwise than through Church Street. And the CDB money, even though we did all the negotiations from the Nevis end, the federal government still had to sign off.
Sure.
Otherwise it could not have come. Right? So that's important. And indeed, if I'm going to just take a half a minute for a little politics, that's why in the 7 years of unity it never happened. Because Dr. Harris, despite the public protestations to the contrary, was never in support of the geothermal project. And if the man sitting down in Bastille as the Prime Minister is not supportive, you have then a block, because you can't access CDB, you can't access any foreign government, you can't get financing from, Green Climate Fund, you can't access any of these because Nevis doesn't have the standing.
Right.
So Nevis can negotiate, but when it comes down to signing on the bottom line, they're going to ask you to have the federal government.
Yes.
And so if the person down there is hostile, the person down there it doesn't want the project, then the project is not going to happen. And that was the dilemma that we faced for the 7 years that we sat in government. And so that is now at an end. We have moved past that, and we are moving forward now and trying to bring this project to fruition.
Great. Now, let me ask you this. How soon after the bidding, the winner has been announced in terms of the bidding, does the drilling start?
Well, that would depend on mobilization. That's a difficult question to answer, because what I've been told is that it depends on where the drill rig is coming from. So, for example, if the company that wins the bid has a drill rig in the region somewhere, then it's far easier. But if they have to bring a drill rig, say, from Turkey or from one of those far distant countries, then it makes it more difficult. So a lot will depend on the bidder that's successful, and then where that bidder has assets in terms of the drill rig. I'm told the drill rig, just to mobilize the drill rig, is over $1 million.
Wow.
So just to give you an idea that you're dealing with us, because remember, they're drilling, I think in some cases up to 2,000, 2,500 feet into the Earth's surface.
Yes.
So these are long distances into the Earth's crust, essentially, in order to be able to achieve the geothermal ambitions of the island and of the country.
Okay. Now, it is said that, and you mentioned it, another 35 million US dollars will be needed for the construction of the geothermal plant and the distribution lines, etc. Is there any progress being made with the sourcing of those additional funds?
Yes, we have already started, but remember that one of the things that we try to do with this project is to cut it in phases. Because initially we were looking at an entire project, and so we were looking at funding $70 million or something like that. So we said, all right, let's try to cut it in phase. Let's deal with the drilling phase. In fact, the drilling phase is the most risky phase. This is a type of project that the risk is front-loaded. Once you've done the drilling, the resource is there, the rest becomes a lot easier. So what we hope to do is once the drilling is awarded and the drilling starts, that we will go to market in earnest now to raise money, whether through equity, that is to get investors to come, or through further debt in order to build the plant and do the necessary. What I will say to you, Mr. Scarborough, is that I am very pleased that the Green Climate Fund, which has somewhere in the region of 15 billion US dollars at its disposal, that the Director General, the person in charge of the Green Climate Fund, Amalfa Duarte, I think her name is. Mafalda Duarte, forgive me, Mafalda Duarte, originally from Portugal. That Mafalda Duarte traveled all the way from South Korea, where the fund is based, to come here to Nevis to see this project for herself. When I had the opportunity to speak with her in a bilateral, I asked her why. And she said that because of all the projects that GCF is doing, the Green Climate Fund is doing, this is the most transformative. That they see that this will be the project that grabs headlines around the world. Because whereas other projects are talking about a mix, so their needs are 1,000 megawatts of power, geothermal is going to give them 100 megawatts. Nevis is talking about 100% of our power being generated by renewables, which will make us the greenest place in the world. And so that is the ambition, and they see that if they can be a part of that, that they can then go to their stakeholders and say, hey, this is a type of transformation that GCF is involved with. So she has already said to us that they will commit additional funding beyond, because remember, the 17 million from the CDB has some GCF money in it already. It has some IDB money in it, and it has some CDB money in it. So she's now saying that she is prepared to commit additional funding. And I believe the amount that I saw was somewhere like 37 million US dollars. So we may well already be very close to the finish line insofar as that first phase is concerned. And if all goes well, the anticipation is that we can do something simultaneously.
Sounds good. Now, I gather from the recent global summit that was held here in St. Kitts Nevis that several countries have shown a keen interest in the development of the geothermal energy here in Nevis. Could you enlighten us further on the type of interest that is being shown, whether financially or otherwise?
Well, people are interested because, as I said, it's a marquee project. It's a type of project that will grab headlines, and everybody knows it. People are interested because this resource has been tested, and it has been said by the experts to be the best geothermal resource that is untapped in the world. In the world, not in the Caribbean, in the world. So this project, I think, has generated a lot of attention. It's generating a lot of attention from the technocrats. It's generating a lot of attention from business leaders. It's generating a lot of attention from governments. And everybody likes a winner. They want a success story. So people want to be a part of it. So yes, you're right. We've had tremendous interest. The United States government has always been a partner in this project. They have been assisting us over the years. And you had assistance from other countries. Countries who have, been there. Italy has assisted us. We've had assistance now from Iceland, of course, in the past, sharing technical expertise, as the case may be. There has been a tremendous level of interest around the world. We now have the Saudi Arabia stepping up to assist us in this. So I think that the interest is there, the sort of momentum on this project is there, and it's really only for us to do it. Dominica is going to get to the finish line before we will. Dominica is promising to commission its first geothermal plant by December of this year. But however, it will only be a 10 megawatt plant. That will make Dominica the second island in the Caribbean to have geothermal. The first plant, of course, is in Bouillon in Guadeloupe. And that plant has been in Guadeloupe now, I believe, for almost 30 years. So Nevis is going to be different to Dominica in the sense that when this plant is done and we switch on geothermal, we're switching off diesel. So Dominica is still going to have diesel as a part of the mix, so to speak, but we'll have enough power here to power up the whole of Nevis and the whole of St. Kitts. So when we switch off diesel in Nevis, St. Kitts also will be switching off diesel, right? So that is what we're trying to achieve, and that sets us apart in terms of just the sheer transformative nature of this particular project.
Sounds good. Now, Honorable, the federal government, as you mentioned earlier, is finally fully on board with our efforts to develop geothermal here in Nevis, and we are all very grateful for the assistance, of course. But I must say to you, there are some concerns being raised by some here in Nevis regarding the governance of geothermal energy when it finally becomes a reality. For instance, we would have heard from Prime Minister Drew that a national board will be put in place to govern the geothermal energy. Inquiring minds are asking who will select that board, bearing in mind that the resource is here on Nevis.
Well, I want there to be no doubt that the resource belongs to Nevis. It belongs to the people of Nevis. I also want there to be no doubt that the resource will not be exploited without the fullest partnership between St. Kitts and Nevis. Even when we tried in the past, we had West Indies Power that was here. We then had a company called Renewable, NREI, Nevis Renewable Energy International, I think they were called. Both would have failed because we were trying to do the project as a Nevis project. As a Nevis project with 13,500 people population, the project is not as viable as a national project involving St. Kitts and Nevis. And as a Nevis project exclusively, the project cannot access concessional financing from CDB, from multilateral organizations, from international partners. United States government is ultimately going to want the federal government to be on board. The Swiss government, the Saudi government, whichever government. So we were having that difficulty. And after years and years of going round and round the chin-chin band, we decided, man, listen, let's sit down as big people and work this out. Somebody, a wise person, told me some time ago that some people want to own 100% of nothing.
True.
And he said, is it better to own 100% of nothing or to own a controlling interest in something? And I think that the something that the people of Nevis should be focused on is finally getting cheap, clean energy. The mother in Hanley's Road right now with 2 or 3 children, I don't think is concerned about how the energy geothermal is to be governed. She's concerned about, can I get cheap power so that I could, at the end of the month, be able to pay my electricity bill and have money left over to do the other things that I need to do. And I think we need to be practical, and we need to understand how business works and what it is we can achieve. Now, the Prime Minister and I, our teams have not yet formalized any model. So let me be clear. The Prime Minister was merely expressing perhaps what he would like to see, but no model has been formalized. We have said that we must meet to discuss and to have our teams, his legal side and the legal side here, to determine a governance model. But thus far, that has not yet happened. So what we have right now is basically a good faith engagement between him and I in relation to this project. And I have said publicly that without his assistance, we could not have got to where we have got.
True.
So he has been instrumental, and I will say that, Mr. Scarborough, because it is true. Many may say it is not politically expedient to say so, but the truth is the truth. We could not have got where we have got to on the geothermal project without the direct involvement of Prime Minister Terence Drew and his commitment to this project. And that is the reality, and he is committed to it because he sees it as a national undertaking that will also benefit his constituencies, Monkey Hill, Kean, they're going to get cheap energy too. So when I talk about that mother of three, that mother of four in Handley's Road, I'm also talking about the mother of three and the mother of four in Spooners, up there in Monkey Hill, somewhere else in Keon in Sandy Point, because the people of the Federation will be the beneficiaries. So I see this as win-win, and I'm prepared to stand up and defend the approach, because, as I said, we would be here for another 20 years, fighting against each other and paying extortionate amounts for electricity. Let me just tell you and say to the public, Israel attacked Iran, and already the price of crude oil has gone up. It's only been a few days, less than a week. Already the price of crude oil has gone up. And if people here think that these conflicts have nothing to do with us, let me tell you, when the price of crude oil goes up, Delta is going to say, we have to charge you more for the diesel that we deliver to run the power plant up there at Prospect. When Delta charges more, two things happen. Either we have to pass on those charges to the public in terms of the fuel surcharge, or we have to swallow that cost, which runs the government and Delta into further debt. There's no free lunch.
Sure.
If we pass it on to the consumer, recall that this government took the fuel surcharge off the domestic consumer, so only the commercial users now pay the full fuel surcharge. But if we pass it on to them and burden them further, so we tell Rams, we tell Hosfords, Value Mart, we say you have to pay more for electricity, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to increase the prices of the goods in the supermarket.
Yep.
What do you think the man who baking bread, using electric ovens to bake bread, is going to do? He's going to increase the cost of bread. The people who drive in the bus, driving the taxi, who are taking diesel at the gas station to fill up their bus and fill up their taxi, they'll be paying more for gas.
True.
And when they pay more for gas, what do you think will happen? They're going to come to the government and say, we want to increase the bus fare. So I want our people to understand that the only solution for us is to insulate ourselves from these outside shocks, because you and I have nothing to do with Israel and Iran.
True.
But when these conflicts flare up, you and I pay the price. And my concern as a politician, my concern as the leader of this island, is that single mother in Handley's Road I spoke about. Is that person who's making minimum wage and having difficulty making ends meet. My job is to try to make their life easier. And the only way I can do that is to try to insulate Nevis, and by extension St. Kitts, through this project, from that foolishness that's happening around the world.
Sure.
We now have a world where Russia is at war. Russia is a major oil producer. Iran is at war, a major oil producer. Venezuela has embargo and restrictions on their oil. Three of the large oil producers of the world, their supply is being restricted. That's going to lead to serious cost of living hikes for our people if it's not dealt with and dealt with effectively. The best thing that could happen for us right now is for there to be a ceasefire in Ukraine and a ceasefire in Iran. Because if this thing continues, we down here in Little Nevis, we in Jessop's and Cotton Ground and Handley's Road and Brownhill, going to pay a price for something that we have absolutely nothing to do with and no control over.
True. I want to bring another concern to you, Honorable, and the reason I'm bringing these concerns, because I know you'll probably get them sometime down the road from somebody else. I want to bring it to your attention. And that the concern has been raised that Prime Minister Joe Gane is seeking to introduce a sovereign wealth fund, which I understand is to include revenues from the development of geothermal energy here in Nevis. The concern that has been raised is how do we ensure that we collect our fair share from our geothermal resource, especially in light of the fact that we are currently struggling to get even 10% from the CBI monies that is being collected on behalf of St. Kitts and Nevis.
So I'm not aware of any sovereign wealth fund that involves anything to do with geothermal. So I'm not sure where that is coming from. That has certainly not been raised with me, nor with my administration. So if that is out there, I'm not sure where that is coming from. But that has never been put to me or my administration about the geothermal proceeds, whatever those geothermal proceeds may be. The sovereign wealth fund has been raised in the context of the citizenship by investment, because that has been in fact suggested by the IMF now for some time, and we are yet to see what that might look like, what the framework of that would look like. So I can't comment further on that because that is not something that certainly has been said to me or has been discussed with me in any way, shape or form.
Okay, good. Now, one last question on that geothermal thing. We are getting loans from different countries through the federal government, of course, but who will ultimately be responsible for the payment of those loans that have been given for the development of the geothermal resource here in Nevis? The federal government or the NIA?
So the short answer will be the project. We hope that we will be able to repay those amounts through the project. But at the end of the day, the federal government is the backstop. And that is why, as I said, we could not do it without the federal government.
Okay.
Because even though the NIA might be the borrower, the federal government is ultimately the entity that is responsible by way of guarantee. And in the case of the Saudi arrangement, the federal government is actually the borrower. So, these are the considerations that we have to take into account when we talk about the extent to which the federal government would benefit from geothermal, because they definitely will be required to carry some of the burden. But the intention is, it's no different, Mr. Scarborough, than if you were to borrow money to start a business. So if Keith Scarborough went to Republic Bank tomorrow and borrowed $1 million to start a business, Keith Scarborough is responsible for the repayment. But what you're hoping is that the revenue from the business would be what you use to do that repayment. So we anticipate that geothermal, for all the various uses of that power, that it will generate significant revenue flows. And that's what we anticipate would be used to pay back, of course, over time, because the Saudi commitment that I saw is a 5-year moratorium, and then I think the loan is repayable over 30 or 40 years or something like that. So these are long-term commitments, but of course you can accelerate payments if you're in a position to do so. So the project will ultimately be the source of revenue for repayment of these loan funds, and then we are hopeful, of course, that along the line we may also be able to access some portion of grant funding, which is what we have said to the Green Climate Fund, that yes, if you can give us some loans, yes, on good terms, but also if you can throw in, some grants as well, that all of this as a mix, financing mix that will allow us to get to the promised land.
Okay, great. Now, you mentioned the CBI sharing a while ago. I'm speaking of the CBI sharing. The report that was requested by the federal government regarding the issue of fair share has been in the hands of both administrations now for some time. Both administrations have been studying the document. Any idea when the general public will get an insight into its contents?
I can't say, because we would want to finish our internal review and our internal discussions before we go public. We have had the document in Nevis now, I would say probably about 2 months, going on 2 months, 6 weeks, 2 months. So really it's time for us to deal with it. The cabinet has had some difficulties because, as you pointed out, I have been traveling. Other colleagues have also been traveling. But this is a matter of priority for us. It is an important matter to us. We have looked at the report. I must tell you, Mr. Scarborough, that the report, in my view, did not tell us anything that we didn't already know. The report, in my view, and I've said so before, that we had people here competent enough to look at the math and work out a formula. So the report, I can say, gave us various scenarios and various options, and that is what we will need to look at. So we need to conclude our position here. I would anticipate that we can do that maybe by no later than, I would say, early next month, and then we would need to convene the joint cabinet to have a discussion to determine how we are going to move forward with that issue of fair share. I should also say that the issue is wider than just CBI. We also have a problem where a lot of companies operating in Nevis, doing sales in Nevis, are paying their VAT only to sink kits. We have a lot of goods coming in, for example, all those, West Tech and those companies, everybody here is ordering things. Music festival coming now, I could tell you the amount of clothes and shoes and makeup and all that's coming in. But because it lands in Sinkits, the duties are being paid over there. And the people of Nevis are not getting the benefit of that. So there are a number of issues that are there to be resolved, just to ensure that we have greater equity and that the Nevis economy, which by any stretch, even the worst critics would say that the Nevis economy has been growing significantly, but that the NIA can benefit from that growth through additional revenue, through additional taxes, because that's the hope. The model is that you grow the economy, and by growing the economy, you generate greater revenue in the country and greater taxes for the government, right? That's really the idea. So if we're growing the economy, but we're not benefiting from the greater taxes because we're having a leakage situation, then we need to look at that very carefully. So there are a number of issues I think that need to be resolved. The issue of corporate tax is still unresolved. You know, you have big companies declaring millions of dollars in profits. National Bank is a good example. They're paying all that corporate tax to St. Kitts. So what about the money that they make in Nevis? Profits that they generate from Nevis and Nevis customers. So there are a number of these issues that need to be resolved. So it is not just an issue of CBI. There are a number of these issues, and we just would want to have a clear understanding and a clear agreement going forward as to how this will be dealt with.
Okay, great. We're fast running out of time, Honorable, and I wanted to get in one or two questions before we close off. The question of constitutional reform is once again in the air. And recently I heard the Prime Minister Duke complaining that St. Kitts doesn't have a government of its own. I've also heard former Minister, the Honorable Sam Conda, saying that St. Kitts needs to have its own government with a federal structure governing both islands. I raise that point because we have heard every administration in St. Kitts and Nevis raise the issue of constitutional reform over the years, but we are yet to see any positive step towards it. Do you think that we will see any reform to our constitution before the next federal elections?
No. I think we can move on to the next question because, like you say, the Constitution has been with us now since 1983. This is now 2025. By my tally, that is 42 years this year. And not even a comma has ever been changed. In fact, when we sought to effect the change by introducing term limits, the opposition of the day then didn't show up, and so we didn't have the numbers to do that. So the truth is, I think it makes for good conversation, but you need the political will to make it happen, and it is something where, in my view, from the first day in office, you need to start to work at it in order to be able to effect it within a 5-year term. Our constitution is not an easy constitution to change. There's some provisions which require a referendum in St. Kitts and a separate referendum in Nevis. And on both referenda, you need to have a 2/3 majority. You know how hard it is to get 66 2/3% of our voting population to agree on an issue?
True.
Just look at the secession vote in Nevis. Something that the NRP had championed from time immemorial. The NRP once had a manifesto which says secession at all costs. That was their manifesto. One line, secession at all costs. And the NRP campaigned against it. Campaigned against it. In fact, the secession vote failed in St. Thomas's. When you look at the numbers, it is the NRP stronghold of St. Thomas's where the vote failed. We end up with 62% voting in that referendum when we needed 66. So it fell short by less than 5%. But unless the political parties have the will to effect change, and unless the NRP in Nevis and the CCM are singing from the same hymnal, PAM and Labour are singing, well, they got two Labours in St. Kitts, but all of them are singing from the same hymnal, we are not going to have any opportunity at constitutional reform. And you see it played out even recently where you had referenda in St. Vincent. It becomes a political issue. Opposition say they're not going to support, and opposition supporters vote no. So that is a matter that I feel is for now, an issue that I'll put on the shelf. That is something that is aspirational rather than achievable. Certainly in the 2.5 years that this federal government has left in its term, I don't see it happening.
Okay. Now, you have said on several occasions that there's some changes that can be done without constitutional reform, and I agree. But we are yet to see any effort being made for those changes to happen. Why do you think that is?
Because I don't think there's the will. I really genuinely do not think there's a will. I think it's a good talking point. You know, if you ask me, I said, oh yes, you know, I think we could change this, we could change that. The last go around with Team Unity, for example, suggested to me that there was a desperate need for a change. We had one man with one seat fire 6 elected members of the parliament. 6 elected members were out the door, and one man inside with 2 others. In fact, the 6 plus the 2 that Labour had, you had 8 elected members in the opposition and a government comprising 3 people. 1, 2, 3. How in this God green or anything like that could make sense? And you have a situation where the Prime Minister of the day, Dr. Harris, only became Prime Minister because he had the support of the 6. When the 6 withdrew their support and said, we no longer support you, we want somebody new, the Governor General responded by taking the advice of the 1 to fire the 6. And then the 1 had no the ability to say, you're going to dissolve Parliament, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. It makes a mockery of democracy.
True.
Because it means that the vast majority, 8 out of 11, were outside in the yard looking in. And you had, when I look at I saw a photo the other day and I just burst out laughing. You had a government comprising of Timothy Harris, Prime Minister, Akila Byron, Eugene Hamilton, that's the 3 elected. You had Juicy Byron, Wendy Phipps, and you had the Cabinet Secretary. Right? And you got 8 elected representatives of the people out there. And that could make sense constitutionally. It's a mockery. So these are things which to my mind need to be fixed. But again, I say, I believe that that's just a talking point for now. I don't really see that there's any appetite to deal with it.
Okay. And finally, Honorable, the matter of boundary change is once again becoming a talking point as we approach yet another federal elections. Do you foresee any changes to the boundaries taking place before the next general election?
That's possible in terms of the timing. I have not yet, however, seen any report. So I will have to wait and see what that report looks like. Of course, the opposition is represented by the Honorable Sean Richards and the Honorable Alexis Jeffers on the Boundaries Commission. So we'll have to see ultimately. I realize that PAM, the People's Action Movement, has put out a position. The CCM has not yet done so. But again, we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But at least I think that there is sufficient time, if they're so minded, to change boundaries in that regard. I think I can publicly say that my preference, and I'm speaking for myself, because the party has not yet formulated a view, but my preference as an individual would be to increase the number of seats. Right? I feel that the country now, the complexity of running this country, 11 seats, and in some instances, as in this government, you have a majority of 1, so you only have 6 seats in government, that it makes it too difficult. I am a firm believer that there's some ministries, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, which too should be standalone ministries. They're so important to our development. Ministry of Agriculture, that, to have a man in charge of health, agriculture, 10 different things. Sometimes when people read in my portfolio, I feel embarrassed, because I'm saying, how is it possible for one person to hold all those hats? But it's not as if I could give up to any of the colleagues, because all the colleagues are in a similar situation.
Right.
We need more people to manage more effectively, and I feel that the number of constituencies should be increased. Nevis, in my view, should have, instead of 3, at least 5 federal seats. St. Kitts should move, I think, from 8 to 10. Nevis, by the constitution, must always have no less than 1/3. So if they move from 8 to 10, we move from 3 to 5. That's 15. I think that it's useful to have an odd number, so you're always going to have a majority. Because if not, you could have deadlock where 2 sides have, the same number of seats. But I favor increasing the number of seats rather than just tinkering with the boundaries themselves.
Okay, great. Well, Honorable, I want to thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us this evening. And I want to give you the remaining minutes to speak a little on the Mango Fest that is coming up, and of course Culturama that is coming up, because I figure you won't be back until Culturama is finished. So use your time to speak of them.
Well, thank you very much. We only have a few minutes left, but the Mango Fest is well and truly on. It's in its 11th edition. Last night we spent some time right here on One Radio talking about the Mango Fest, talking about all the great things that's going to happen. It's from July 3rd to July 6th. There are a number of events. In fact, I'm told that a lot of the early events already sold out. But The grand finale, of course, that everybody looks forward to is the Sunday event at the MGR Park. We anticipate having over 50 local chefs. We now have the VIP, which will be managed by Carambola in St. Kitts, and we are seeing more kitchen business people and restaurateurs, chefs wanting to come on board, which we encourage. They think that this can become a really national festival. It's attracting a lot of attention, I can tell you. Even whilst I was in New York for the launch of our new campaign, tourism campaign, there were people who were volunteering that they were coming for the Mango Festival. And so we anticipate that it's going to be a very significant festival that will attract significant attention. And of course, Culturama 51 is well and truly on. That is being promoted. In fact, what we are urging people to do this summer is to come in for Music Fest. That's the end of June. Stay for Mango Festival, which is just the week following. And then for those who are coming home, to come home for Culturama. We know it's a summer lime. It's something that's going to attract the usual attention regionally and internationally. A lot of our people in the diaspora tend to come home for Culturama, so we encourage them to come home and be with us. A lot of people came home last year. They had a wonderful time, and we encourage them to come back and be here for Culturama 51. So we're looking forward to a great celebration. Mr. Scarborough, thank you again for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity to speak with you, but more importantly, to speak to the people of Nevis, whom I serve. So I'm very grateful, and I say thank you for this effort, and thank you for the opportunity.
And thank you very much, Honorable, for being our guest this evening. Folks, we have come to the end of another edition of our Government at Work program. Join us again next week when we shall do it all over again. Do enjoy the rest of the evening's programming. Then have a pleasant night's rest. Good night.